What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And as part of that collaboration last year in 2021, since we're coming to the end of 2022, I was part of a team that reached out to over 100,000 dads and fathers all around the world. As long as, and as always, I say, I'm mixing up my words here. As I always like to say, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and the solution for someone's problem. And we're broadcasting live today, December 11th. It's about 5 o'clock, a little bit after 5 o'clock Eastern time, and we are on Black Canada Talking Time. And if you don't know what Black Canada Talking is, it's a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes, and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. So we have our roundtable coming up today. We have Elle and Cesar who are going to be with us. But before we bring them up to the digital stage, just want to make everyone aware that the Dr. Vibe Show has been nominated in the Best Black Podcaster category at this year's ByBlacks.com People's Choice Awards. ByBlacks.com is Canada's #1 online magazine. And all you need to do is go to byblacks.com/PCA/vote to vote. And you can vote every 24 hours from now till the end of the year, which is December 31st, 2022. So what I've done is I've actually created a little video to show you what you need to do, how to vote. So right after that video is done, we'll bring Elle and Cesar up. They are in the green room. So we'll see you back in a few minutes. Check out the video. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And through that collaboration last year, I was part of a team that reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. And I am excited about this video I'm making for you. It's a short video, and I have a big ask. The Dr. Vibe Show has been nominated in the Best Black Canadian Podcaster category for this year's ByBlacks.com People's Choice Awards. Now, ByBlacks.com is Black Canada's #1 online magazine, and I'm very humbled to be nominated in this category. Now, I have a big ask. I would like you to vote for me. I would like to win in this category. I'd like all of us to win. So I'm just doing this short video to show you how you can vote. And do note, you can vote once every 24 hours from now till the end of day, December 31st, 2022. So what you're looking at right now is the website address that you go to first. And that website address is byblacks.com/PCA/vote. Let me repeat that website, byblacks.com/PCA/vote. When you get onto that page, you're going to scroll down and you're going to see Podcaster 2022. Podcaster 2022. You see at the time I'm recording this, there's 187 votes. I want us to put in 1,187 votes for Dr. Vibe. I liked 18,700 votes for Dr. Vibe. This can be done because you can vote once every 24 hours. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. We want this to be a big party so we can win it. Now, getting back to it, Podcaster 2022. You click on that. And now it's going to take you to another page. Podcaster 22 at the top, Best Black Canadian Podcaster for 2022. 188 votes, registered by 1 vote. Last vote 46 minutes ago. This is when I'm recording it. The poll votes are hidden from public viewing, and the poll votes will be closed 4 weeks from now. It's probably a little less than 4 weeks from now. There are the 3 nominees. Black people check in. On the Path of Scheudled Nebhard, and there is the Dr. Vibe Show right here. This is where you got to be. This is where you got to go. Now, click on the Dr. Vibe Show. There you go. Vote. So you got to click on the Dr. Vibe Show, and right underneath this, you click on vote. And there you go. Done. That's all you need to do. Now, remember, you can vote every 24 hours from now till end of day, December 31st. I would really appreciate your support in this, and I would like to have a big online party when we claim victory on this. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, message me. Probably the best way to message me is one of two ways. Email address, dr.vibe at the dr.vibeshow.com, or you can hit me via Instagram at the dr.vibeshow, the Dr. Vibe Show. So as always, I like to say, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourself grace. And looking forward to celebrating with you. Remember, you can vote every 24 hours. Take care, be well, and keep the faith.
Take care, be well, and keep the faith.
All right, we are back. And Elle and Cesar in the house. What's going on, family?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, good day. How's everyone been lately?
Good. I was saying that my hair looks demented today because I ran. And so it's a combination of poofy and flat all at the same time. But I'm good.
Well, it's something that Cesar and I cannot really relate to. Maybe Cesar with his beard, but I don't think on top. We're nimble. We're nimble. Always good to see both you, and always good to see that both you. Well, I know Elle, your time is tight, so let's get right into some conversation pieces. First thing up, WNBA star Brittney Griner is back in the U.S. following a high-profile Russian jailing and prison swap. What you say?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start. So just to give some of the background, so Victor Bout is the guy that they swapped for. He was nearly done his sentence as well. So some of the outrage about like, oh, you know, this weapons dealer, I think he had like 3 years left or something in his sentence anyway. Secondly, it was actually not that I'm obviously pro arms dealing, but the prosecutor on his case themselves actually was like he should be released because it was a pretty bogus entrapment when he was arrested in the first place. And of course, we can't also not point out that all of these countries, the US, Canada, etc., we sell weapons. We sell weapons to Saudi Arabia to use on Yemen. We sell weapons to Israel that are used in the occupation in Palestine. We sell weapons around the world, as does the US, obviously. So the irony, of course, of the world's biggest arms dealers then being like, oh, no, an arms dealer, as they literally deal arms to the Ukraine, which we know are going to be ending up in all kinds of hands across the world as a result of that, is absurd. So just to say that there's a lot of fear mongering around what that swap is that isn't really accurate for where he was in his sentence and what the actual conditions of that were. And in fact, it was, yeah, like there's a lot of, if you actually look into the case, like it was a pretty bogus kind of conviction anyway. They wanted to get him and they more or less like went for it in some fairly shady ways. Of course, you also know that were she not a Black lesbian, there would not be the kind of like so-called outrage around her. So the objection that people have to her is that she, like many WNBA players and many athletes, particularly in 2020, you know, knelt during the anthem and said, you know, talked about police brutality in America. Of course, America touts its democracy, which includes the right to protest. And then, of course, if Black people exercise that right, you're a hater. So the narrative is being like, oh, ha, ha, like she didn't like the American flag and now she can enjoy being in Russia. Like, why should we bring her back? Another great irony of the whole thing, though, on the same. So as we're seeing these, like, obviously very racist, very homophobic and very sexist, misogynoir ways of responding to her, which like simply wouldn't be the case if she was a white male American tourist, like hiking in the mountains or something. But because she's a Black WNBA star who has the audacity to speak out about politics, now she's an America hater that deserves to rot in a prison camp for like 10 years. Beyond that, of course, is that America, of course, has the largest prison population in the world by like a country mile. America actually has 25% of the world's prisoners. The next country is China, that has a significant amount less. And of course, the vast majority of America's prisoners are Black people, Latino people, etc. So I think I've said this before here. If not here, I said it on my own radio show, that one of the spectacles that we get is people saying things like, oh, not every country has the same liberal drug laws as the US. You're like, what liberal drug laws? Like, you guys have the biggest prison population in the world, not per capita, like actually by number. 25% of the prisoners in the world, largely fueled by the war on drugs. So I don't know what you're talking about when you say like our liberal drug policy. Canadians have to be careful, for example, in like, if you have a medical marijuana license, you're going to cross the border, they can look into your records and they can deny you entry into the US, not because you have like cannabis on you, but even if you have a license, right? Like, these are things that are part of the US war on drugs, which has also imported cops and weapons into Canada as well. Our policies are highly influenced by US policies, and our incarceration has also gone up massively in relation to the war on drugs, stoked by the US. Our police train in the US. They get the weapons and everything from the US that they use on us. So we're not separate from this either. So I say all of that to say, as usual, there is a mass amount of US white supremacist hypocrisy around this whole case. With that said, obviously, Chanel Griner like never gave up on fighting for her wife. It took her 9 months to get her wife home. So, you know, people often talk about, I don't know, our qualities of love or whatever as Black people. And we saw that love and devotion front and center, like the fight that she had for her wife. We've seen Brittney had to cut her locks because they were literally freezing in the air in Russia because it was so frozen. So we see the kind of toll that took on her physically. Hopefully that she feels able to return to the WNBA. Obviously, like the trauma of being in prison, the literal physical trauma plus the emotional and mental trauma. Obviously, she doesn't owe anyone anything to return to the court, but if that's what she wants to do, I hope that she feels that return. The WNBA has supported her all the way and spoke out for her when nobody was. And that league, just the final thing I'll say is that the WNBA has led all leagues, has consistently been, so long before the NBA was willing to do things for Black Lives Matter, the WNBA was wearing Say Her Name shirts of Breonna Taylor. They have been the most radical league, a league largely made up of Black women on social justice issues, far more than any other league. Where they have gone, others have later followed. So the NBA has followed the lead of the WNBA in terms of taking on social justice issues. And they continue to remember her, to have her number, to honor her, and to fight for her. And a final thing, I keep saying final thing, a last thing is that whenever we have these incidents in like foreign countries like Russia and China, we like to make this big deal about their prison system. And just a reminder, of course, again, that US has the same brutal prison conditions. The conditions in the US are no better. And in fact, a piece of news that came out very recently about Ron DeSantis, who's now the heir apparent to Trump, the expected that like people are putting their eggs in his basket now for presidential run, especially as people back away from Trump, which we can talk about when we make it to Kanye. As we're seeing Trump go down in estimation due to the midterms, and Herschel Walker, which we may want to talk about. So his like midterm picks that really sabotaged a lot of the Republicans' ability to win those midterms. So Ron DeSantis, who's the heir apparent, it came out that he worked in Guantanamo Bay and he was supposed to be monitoring the torture, but people who were incarcerated in Guantanamo Bay have talked about how he participated in torture. He oversaw it. He encouraged it. He got pleasure from it. So he's basically a torturing, human rights violating psychopath who was like Fallujah and in Guantanamo Bay that was supposed to be observing human rights violations, was actually encouraging them and like participating in them, and essentially like part of this like regime that allowed all this torture to take place. So just a reminder that people can point the fingers all they want at Russia. We don't have to minimize human rights abuses in Russia. They are real. We don't have to pretend they don't exist. But if we're going to do that, let's talk about how the potential next president of the United States tortured many innocent people during the war on terror, and is now could be the next president. So let's not pretend that these things only exist in Russia. Okay, your turn, Cesar.
Hold on. Okay. Okay. Elle, coming out on fire. As usual, I want to just comment from someone who I have not seen for a long time, and I truly miss. Nova Nicole says, and yes, she is a WNBA star. I wonder if her branded as, quote, two-time Olympic gold medalist, unquote, would have humanized her. A shame. Didn't know she had to cut her hair.
Yeah, if you see the pictures, and she said because the locks were freezing, and this prompted all kinds of stupid comments by white people about how dirty locks are, and I bet it got lice, and the usual. So we just see the white supremacy on full display, where a Black woman can't even be like, my hair is freezing in the cold and I had to cut off my locks. And then and Black people, like, what it means for someone to cut their locks. Like, that is a serious business, right? Like, people don't just cut their locks for no reason. And then we had to be subjected to the white supremacy around this. So again, we have seen all kinds of white prisoners around the world who have been brought home with great fanfare and feted and given the compassion they deserve. And then when it's a Black woman, and particularly a Black gay woman, and perhaps also because of being a Black, you'd think being an athlete would be helpful, but we know for Black women, she's very tall, so it's seen like she's not seen as a woman, right? She's seen as like manly and inhuman, something that has been put on Black women for generations since the time of slavery, that we're not real women, we're not feminine, we're not deserving of the same vulnerability and care as other women. And we're seeing this just in full display. This idea that she brought it on herself, she deserves it, don't do the crime, all of these very anti-criminal narratives that are used against Black people, like these very dehumanizing narratives, coupled with homophobia, misogyny, and racism, to really expose. I mean, we don't need, like, it's not like we don't know how racist and disgusting the US is, but we've just seen it front and center for someone who exactly put her body on the line for multiple Olympic Games. The reason why she had a marijuana prescription in the first place is the deep damage done to her body and the body of all elite athletes through sports, where they're in chronic pain, they can't sleep, they have all kinds of physical issues. And that was why her doctor, she actually did have a prescription for medical marijuana to deal with that kind of chronic pain, which we know in fact affects so many of our athletes, from brain damage in the NFL to like premature arthritis. So these people that we watch on our screens are taking a huge toll for our entertainment. And then people want to dismiss her and act like it was her fault and create these narratives about her. So yes, thank you for that comment.
Okay, one other additional one before Cesar gets on. Nova says a deeper violation of her person by cutting her hair. Cesar, it is your time.
No, Sister L, you said it so well. She spoke very eloquently and in length. What can I really add? What can I really add? It's a political situation. It's the context of, Vladimir Putin that unfortunately too many Africans, and it's very more seen among Africans, tend to look at as some type of hero standing up against the West and etc., as if there's no anti-Black racism in Russia. Vladimir Putin, it's not about being against him or for him, but he does things according to his interests. And when I say his interests, you even have to wonder if he really acts according to Russian interests, aka the Russian people's interests. But to really stick to Brittney Griner, she's a victim. She's a victim because, Sister L put so very well the context of her arrest. But ultimately, when you look at it, she was a pawn in a geopolitical game in which, basically, it's not so much that Russia is getting back Victor Bout, aka the Lord of War, aka the title of that movie with Nicolas Cage, based on him. But I just find it unfortunate. Not that because we are Black we have to agree on the same thing. That's not what I'm saying. But I find it unfortunate that we have many Black people who basically trash her release, and it's not just. I don't think it's just limited to the fact that she is this very tall. I believe she's 6'9" or 6'10", if my memory is correct. This very tall basketball playing, tattoo wearing, and of course, especially lesbian woman. I think, very unfortunately, the miseducation of too many of us, me, from what I saw online, people will suddenly become geopolitical experts, analyzing the deal, calling it a bad deal because Russia is getting an arms dealer. And, it's ridiculous. We should be happy that a black person, especially wrongfully convicted and arrested, even by Russian law, according to her lawyers. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not. I've worked at foreign affairs, yes, but I have zero knowledge about Russian law. Other than as a black person, I wouldn't want to be arrested in Russia. That's for sure. So even by her lawyers, she was wrongfully convicted. She was a victim from get-go. It doesn't diminish the reality in terms of the other prisoner of war, Paul Whelan, that some people speak of as, an American hero. The Russians say he was a spy. It doesn't diminish the value of him, that he should have been brought back. But from what America, the US have said, and even the judge, I was watching CNN, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, the judge who sentenced Victor Bout to jail said herself that the deal was simple. It was 1-for-1, and the Russians had made it clear the one they wanted was Victor Bout, and the one they were willing to release was Brittney Griner. So this is not like, what choice you have? It's either you get Brittney Griner or you get no one. And it's either that we get Victor Bout or you get no one. It's pretty simple. So, no, that's all I will say. I hope she gets all the assistance that she gets. I hope, and it's also important to say this, the whole debate in terms of women playing sports and how much are they being paid, etc. And in regards to the WNBA, sure, WNBA does not attract as the NBA, but we can really have a conversation in terms of sponsors, but we definitely should have a conversation in terms of how much these women are being paid so that they don't need to go play overseas. I'm not here talking I heard Charles Barkley, I believe it was yesterday. It's not about paying them $40 million like the Steph Curry or LeBron James, but it definitely should be about paying them something. When I say paying them, the NBA, actually gives a lot of money to the WNBA. That's true, but still, I think it's a bigger reflection on the value that we give to women's sports as a whole. When you look in the U.S., the case of the U.S. Women's soccer team, I'm sorry, far more successful than the men's soccer team, and yet getting paid less. Yes, there's a matter of sponsoring, and yes, we can talk about men's sports being more intense, being more this and that, but I don't think that's exactly necessarily a fair comparison if we give equal chances, notably in terms of sponsors, and we value the sport not just for little girls, female teenagers, and women, but really also for men. As father to a daughter, a girl dad. I would like that if my daughter was to become an athlete, that she doesn't need to go play, basketball or especially football in my case, obviously, soccer, of course, not American football, never. But, I wouldn't want her to go play in Russia or China. I want her to be in a place where there's more safety and there's more dignity to her person, notably as a woman, especially as a Black woman. So that's really what I will say to this. I'm happy she's back, and I hope she gets all the assistance and the support that she needs. And Canada 2025, we're getting a women's soccer league. USA, WNBA, let us work on supporting the initiative to increase the revenues, advertising, sponsors, the value of the game, maybe improve the dynamics of the game. I don't know what it would take. I mean, Steph Curry changed the NBA with his shooting. Shaquille changed it playing in the center. Michael Jordan. You see what I mean? One single player can change the dynamic of the game. So it's possible.
Great perspectives from both you and yes, Cesar. I know in previous conversations I've hosted about this subject, it did come up that the reason why ladies like Brittney Griner go to other countries because they get paid better in other countries. So that's why she was there. But I will say, any melanated person be careful where you're going.
Oh yeah.
Know what the laws are, know everything like that, because at the best of times we're targets.
If I may ask very quickly, Dr. Vibe, on what you just
Sure.
said, and I think it's very important that our Black people understand this. Absolutely don't do into some Black inferiority complex, but this is just the reality of the world that we live in terms of when you're Black. So too often I've heard Black people make the joke about white people getting kidnapped when they go to certain countries of the world. And it doesn't happen to Black people, but you have to be aware of something. On the four corners of the world, anti-Black racism is real. And as such, you can become a victim for anything and any reason. When I was in Egypt, invited by the government, there was something, I think it was a general who told me, I don't remember exactly, but I was with the elites, and one of the things they had told me was the respect they were giving to me was because I was neither an athlete or an entertainer. I was invited as an intellectual. It's not that it shocked me, but what I'm trying to say by saying this is I kind of find it unfortunate in the sense that we are still seen through the stereotypes even when we go to other countries. Because whether I'm seen as an athlete or an entertainer, musician, it doesn't change the fact that even if I'm there for intellectual purposes, the rarity of my type is still seen through the lens of anti-Black stereotypes. I think our Black people must be aware of this, must be reminded of this for our own survival everywhere.
Al, do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think a running theme of the conversation today is probably going to be like the way to also address like human rights issues in other countries. So there's this way that like white people or, you know, supremacists of various forms will only care about human rights when they're in other countries. And versus, of course, like we don't want to minimize, exactly, like what it's like to be Black in Russia or Russia's anti-Blackness. And, you know, they're also in Africa. They're also doing all kinds of stuff like fomenting war that harms our people. We're seeing the same thing with the World Cup in Qatar. So I guess just one of the difficulties that will probably move this conversation today is in recognizing the hypocrisy in the way that the West talks about human rights is not to minimize the actual human rights struggles, actual struggles against oppression, authoritarianism in these countries. As we move to talking about the World Cup, right, where we see the same thing where there's this hyper focus on like human rights violations in Qatar, which are real. Qatar is homophobic. Qatar has like had a bunch of migrant workers die. Those things are not to be minimized. We don't have to what about them in order to talk about our own countries. But the point just being that all fired interest in human rights goes away mysteriously. So the same people that are talking about LGBTQ rights in Qatar are being homophobic towards Brittney Griner here at home, right? So when it's convenient, so when the Olympics were in Sochi, everyone was talking about how homophobic Russia is, which it is, but then they're like, oh, Brittney Griner deserved it, right? So it's also just to recognize that people kind of want to have it both ways, right? They want to point out homophobia in other countries when it's convenient to our narrative being civilized, but then be homophobic themselves when it's convenient to their anti-Black or anti-justice narrative here at home. So that's all.
All right. So, El, you're an announcer's dream, and since you do radio, you just gave a lovely segue about the World Cup. And I know Cesar wanted to talk about it. And it sounds like each one of you have something to chat about. Cesar, I'll let you lead, talking about the World Cup.
Yes, thank you so much. What I wanted to, what is to say about this World Cup? El really opened the topic very well. But one side, it's a great World Cup. There's a lot of upsets. Congratulations to Morocco, first African team to make it to the semifinals. And of course, you have this other African team called France with so many African players. We're going to have a great semifinals between France and Morocco, and the other one being between Croatia, that country that the Canadian coach somehow thought he would defeat, between Croatia and Argentina. If I can, quick parenthesis, as a Black person, I never support Argentina, and I remind Black people I don't understand how you could support Argentina. It's the only country of the Americas to never have a black player on the team. That should tell you something when we talk about systemic racism. Now, in terms of our very topic here, what I would also say is the fact of great World Cup in terms of the games, the animation, etc. But there's still the other aspect of this World Cup. Absolutely, the human rights violations and issues that are often put under the excuse of religion and culture, but we can very well see whether we talk about women's rights, it's very relative to the success that what's her name, Miss Croatia, Ivana Knoll, that white woman with the sexy outfits in the stadium is getting a lot of popularity, notably from the Arab fans, but at the same from the Arab male fans, I have to specify. But at the same time, we have to talk about how, unfortunately, there's so much corruption that we can see in terms of the World Cup. You have 54 African countries and they only get 5 spots. Meanwhile, you have, I think it's 12 or 13 European countries. And in terms of South America as a continent, 10 countries and they get 5 spots. So Africa as a continent, and by extension, the Caribbeans, are discriminated. And there's an entire side conversation regarding the success of Team Morocco, as one of the players, Sofiane Boufal, had talked about dedicating the victories of Morocco to the Arab world, for Morocco and the Arab world. This may come off harsh, but I think it's important that we say this. Too many of our Black people do focus on the negative said by one person. Meanwhile, the manager of the team clearly said that he's there to represent Africa as a continent, etc., etc. Absolutely, there is anti-Black racism in Northern Africa, notably Morocco, 100%. But the point that I'm trying to say here is that we have to get past a certain level of easy emotivity in terms of putting so much focus on that. Let us recognize that, yes, there are some Northern Africans, Maghrebis, notably Moroccans, who will never feel like they're Africans because of a superiority complex from slavery and centuries of Islamic domination, Islamic colonization. But that should never stop us from recognizing this is a success for Africa as a continent. But even more important, because we got used to the World Cups to see countries like Cameroon, my birth country, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal from time to time, Cote d'Ivoire. Let us take this opportunity so that we have African countries, African selections that work even harder to not only deserve the spots, but make it to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, make it to the finals and win. Win, win, win. That is what matters more than anything else, because it's when we see successful Black people like Dr. Vibe and the Dr. Vibe Show, when we see successful Black people such as Dr. L. Jones, when we see successful Black people and Black professionals and Black entertainers succeeding where we are not expected. No disrespect to the Jay-Z and the Beyonce. We're not surprised they succeed there. But the World Cup has to come to Africa or to the Caribbean. The World Cup has to basically be something, the biggest sports competition, where we can all put seriousness into it, put more efforts, combat the systemic racism, and as such, rid ourselves of some inferiority complexes regarding that world stage scene. That's the World Cup.
Dr. L. Jones?
Yeah, well, thank you, Cesar.
Thank you.
I mean, I think the colonial grudge match of the match is going to be obviously Morocco versus France. And one of the things that's always interesting is how the Western world always thinks that colonialism is so far in the past and can't understand when, these matches that are with former colonizers are like, so hype for people, right? So now let's not. So, I mean, there's been a lot of debate around sort of Morocco as a decolonial symbol, because as people pointed out, Morocco itself is deeply involved in acts of supremacy against other countries, oppression of their own minorities. And this is true across the world. Like every country, Canada is, we won't search for Indigenous women's remains in the landfills, right? Like this is not new. And it's also obviously like many of the countries that are in the Arab world or like Qatar, these countries have authoritarian dictators that repress their own populations. And we are not going to pretend that's not the case. But like, to say that the team is not the government, right? So there's been this kind of debate because a lot of people are saying, as this African team, as this team playing against these European countries and playing their colonizers, right? And winning, it's become this kind of symbol of the decolonial world, especially because of the support for Palestine. So they've been raising the Palestinian flag, and this has been happening across the games in the World Cup, particularly with the African and Arab teams. So Tunisia, all of these teams have been pulling up the Palestinian flag, which is interesting, of course, because in the West, Palestine remains virtually unspoken. You got accused of anti-Semitism if you even mention Palestine. And of course, there is actual, real, brutal anti-Semitism. We've seen it coming from Ye and Nick Fuentes, Emilia Yiannopoulos, really, really bursting out. And I'm not, again, interested in minimizing that. Hanukkah is coming up. And I have Jewish friends who are saying they're scared to put the menorahs in their windows right now because of the kind of really vicious, violent anti-Semitism, people that are literally going and patrolling their synagogues. And we as Black people firsthand know what that's like. So I'm not going to minimize the actual, real, and rise and brutal anti-Semitism when we have people like Ye, obviously in contact with the far right and these Nazis, literally sitting there with neo-Nazis and saying, I love Hitler, so I'm not minimizing that, but I'm saying obviously that is different from recognizing the repression of Palestinians. And because that distinction is not made in the West or cynically wielded in the West, Palestine is virtually unspoken other than to accuse people of anti-Semitism. So to see these games in the Arab world and see the kind of support for Palestine as being really interesting in terms of thinking through our media, right? They don't know how to talk about this. Why is Morocco hoisting the Palestinian flag? Why are teams chanting free Palestine, Palestine, Palestine at the matches? And this is one of these kind of outbreaks of Arab pride in particular. And many people have pointed out that it's also a freedom movement against their own government. So it's not just that they're supporting Palestine, they're supporting Palestine against their own governments and also supporting a general principle of freedom, which is also speaking back to the repressive, authoritarian, dictatorial regimes that they are under as well. So under the Palestine flag through this tournament has been flying an idea of freedom through the Arab world as well, that the Western media can't really understand, so can only frame as either anti-Israeli or racist or all of these things, and not understanding what the politics are, which is a real symptom, of course, of whenever something is outside of the Western world and their vision of what foreign policy looks like, and who they pick and choose as the good and bad people, will sell arms to Saudi Arabia, but then talk about dictators in other countries, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been really interesting to watch, just the politics of what's happening now that this game is not in a Western country. And again, I'm not interested in minimizing what happens to migrant workers in Qatar. It's often Ethiopians and other African workers. They're the ones that are particularly darker skinned workers. We know that nannies is particularly brought in from African countries and have their paper stolen, raped, abused. This is our people. This isn't a separate issue from us. So when we're talking about human rights in Qatar, I don't know what we're picturing, but it's African people that are, as usual, at the bottom of the social ladder. And as usual, when we're talking about migrant labor, it's Indians and it's us. So this abuse is African people. So we must speak out about that and understand that. But also, as I said, the West will focus on that or talk about them being homophobic, but not focus, of course, on all the other repressions that are happening. I doubt anyone's going to try and boycott the LA Olympics because of America's prison population, right? So just to say that, again, that some of the human rights discourse rings hollow when it can only be applied when it's an Arab country or a Muslim country or a brown country or a Black country, and can't be applied into our own countries as well. What else can I say about the World Cup? So the grudge match is going to be Morocco-France. That'll be a hot game, obviously. There's a reason why they speak French in Morocco, right? So, but of course, the French players themselves, as pointed out, most of their players are actually African players, and there's actually players on the Morocco team that are French as well, that like have lived in France and chose to play for Morocco, which has been a site of rage for the French. So you bring in people into ghettos, like they're kept separate. The amount of racism in France towards Muslim immigrants and African immigrants is off the chain. And then when people choose not to put up with that, we've seen the kind of racism towards Black French players, like as they're playing for their countries, the Black British players that are getting like yet again like the N-word and all this stuff put under them. And then you wonder why these players want to go play for their home countries instead, right? And now everyone's enraged, like, how dare you go and play under the flag of Morocco? You should be playing for France. So maybe you should treat people right. Like maybe like stop using them just for football and then treating all their people like trash in the ghetto if you want people to like have loyalty to you. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the World Cup.
Anything else you want to add, Cesar?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just before I forget, as we speak about, whether we talk about human rights violations in terms of Qatar, but also the whole Arab world, Middle East, but even right here in the Americas, for those who follow football, 2014, the World Cup when it was in Brazil, the people in the favelas who were forcibly moved, notably by police, to paint a rosy picture, the people who look like us on the screen. You see what I mean? Very interestingly, yesterday, something happened yesterday during the match of France versus England. You have the captain of the British team, Harry Kane, who missed his penalty. If anyone remembers, 2 years ago, during the Euro Cup, 3 Black players, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Bukayo Saka, missed the penalties, and there was a wave of anti-Black racism towards them. Harry Kane will miss his penalty shooting to the moon, kind of like Dogecoin. No racism, no discrimination. The British tabloids are very understanding of the passion and his dedication. This is just a reminder. As per France and Morocco, many African, and by African, when I say African, I'm really talking in Africa and in the Francophone world, are speaking of it as really Africa versus Africa. You have an African team and the other team, well, it's a bunch of Africans. So on the Moroccan team, you have most of the players are actually born in Europe. Many of them are born in France, born and raised in France. On the French team, well, they may be born in France, but they're all, they literally could all play for X number of African teams. Something important that we must not forget is the World Cup is the biggest sports event in the world, bigger than the Olympics. And every World Cup, there are human rights violations. The classic cases are 1978 Argentina with the colonial dictatorship, and especially 1936 Berlin with Hitler. But let us not fool ourselves. Every Olympics comes with its baggage of human rights issues. And guess what's going to happen? I was listening to Dr. Vab. I don't know if I can give the name of another show. Is that something? I don't know.
Absolutely. It's okay.
Okay. I was listening to CBC.
I wanted to talk about this too, the racist coverage of Alphonso Davies. But sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I was listening to CBC. I believe it's called Cross Country Canada, the show with Ian Hanumansing. And this was not this Sunday. I'm going to say 2 Sundays ago. As I was about to, in the context of my work, I was leading a full week of forums on women's rights worldwide. And on Ian Hanumansing, CBC's cross-country show, the topic was about human rights violation in Qatar and the World Cup of football. And this white man called from Windsor, clearly saying, he's white, he's a white man, and he's calling from Windsor. And what he said was excellent. He basically talked about how legitimate it is to address human rights violations in Qatar. But are Canadians ready for 4 years from now, 2026, when the World Cup is coming to Mexico, US and Canada, are Canadians ready to have not just Arabs, but the whole world look at the treatment of Black people, and especially indigenous people such as the missing and murdered women and girls? And he pointed out something else. In all of our Canadian cities, what is it, an hour? I think he said an hour, but we know anywhere from an hour to 3 hours around any Canadian city, there is an indigenous community, and an indigenous community that very likely does not have access to clean drinking water or electricity. And yet here are Canadians being moralistic about Qatar, rightfully so. But to what extent are we necessarily better towards certain other populations? I think it's important that we have not only this conversation, but that these conversations become tools to push our governments to change, not just in terms of creating a Canadian women's soccer league, not just in terms of, for example, the WNBA seeking ways to improve the salaries of the players, but really so that we can bring changes, concrete changes to our societies through policies and procedures, but really concrete social changes. Canada is not always that much better than the rest of the world.
Well, that did give me a good segue into the next issue, but unfortunately, I have two things to say, so I can't make use of it. I was going to be speaking of women, but very quickly, also CBC did some incredibly anti-Black coverage of Alphonso Davies for like no apparent reason. So last week they ran an article basically saying he was weaponizing his celebrity against the team. I don't even know what it was about. It's bizarre. So the player that's actually scored the goal, the guy that's clearly been carrying the team. So one of the things he's been doing, obviously, is focusing on the game, and he doesn't want to talk to the media, which now that we, of course, have had so many discussions about mental health of athletes, from Simone Biles in Tokyo, Naomi Osaka's been really open about her anxiety issues. So these players are in huge tournaments. They're young. They have all kinds of pressure riding on them. And we know how Black people get ripped up and torn up when they speak to the media. So like, again, Brittney Griner, so God forbid a Black person open their mouth and say anything, and then they get dragged. So he made the choice not to speak to the media while he's focusing on the game. And CBC was basically calling him entitled, a diva. But of course, if he'd open his mouth, then they'd either be calling him stupid and ignorant, and he can barely put a sentence together, or God forbid he say something political. He's dividing Canadians. So it was a really disgusting attack on him for no reason, on like very spurious grounds. He didn't do anything. He didn't speak to the media, and then they like he's like not giving enough to like he got a jersey first, and his other teammates didn't get a jersey yet. So I'm like, oh, how dare a Black person be popular? So CBC has done some really disgraceful anti-Black coverage, just trying to pick on Alphonso Davies for no reason. Of course, the same country that also will pick on like PK Subban, who doesn't play the quote white way, as the famous slip of the tongue so-called was made, that continues to target Vander Kane, like Black players, especially, and they dare to step on the white field in Canada. Donovan Bailey got this for being so-called arrogant. The way that Black Canadian players, unless you like either shuck and jive, are like super, super happy all the time and positive, like you have to just go out of your way to be palatable to white people. Otherwise, they'll just be disgusting to you. So shame on CBC for that coverage. And the other thing I just want to say very quickly is that, and I didn't mean to say athletes are shucking and jiving. They want you to shuck and jive, right? Like they want you to put on this show of like, I'm non-threatening. I'm a happy, positive Black person. I don't see racism, and then they'll accept you. And if you do anything else, it's like they'll drag you. And then one quick thing is also like visas. Let's talk about how so many people can go to this World Cup that can't come to games, not because they don't even have the money, but because, as we saw the World's AIDS Conference, as we've seen with like Afrofest, our countries don't let in people from the Middle East and from Africa. And like the visa process, athletes had trouble getting to Worlds in Oregon. Like athletes that were running, the Kenyan 100-meter runner had to like leave at the last minute, get off a flight, and had 2 hours to get to the stadium because of the holdups with his visas. So let's also talk about how so much of the world is able, like people want to bitch and moan about it being in Qatar, but so much of the world is able to go when it's in South Africa or Qatar because our countries don't let them in, or they put them through an onerous visa process, or people are like, I can't like take the risk, I can't buy all these hotels and spend tens of thousands of dollars and not know if I'll be able to get in the end. So we're seeing a different audience, and this is why we're seeing things like Palestine flags and all of this stuff, because people that are normally like barred from coming to Western countries are able to go and be part of this event. So I just wanted to raise that, but I'm going to move us on because I myself have to go. Very briefly, we don't have to talk too much about this fool. I just want to point out that like Kanye West, so-called Ye, has yet again fixated on Black women. This man loves to drag Black women who have done nothing but save our community. He said Harriet Tubman did nothing but release Black people to work for white people, which is actually ignorant. This man has admitted that he doesn't read, and he doesn't read because he doesn't know anything about the history of Harriet Tubman, who was extremely anti-capitalist and in fact was pooling Black women's money to build cooperative laundries during the war and teaching Black women how to do self-economics, and like literally was divested from white capitalism at a time when the men were trying to recolonize Africa. So you don't know anything. And now he's turned on Rosa Parks and said Rosa Parks was a plant for white people as well. So this useless man who has been anti-Black long before he was publicly anti-Semitic, by the way, and like obviously we are all rightly horrified at those comments. No interest in excusing them. They're disgusting. They're violent. He's a Holocaust denier. He's a Hitler lover. He's a white supremacist. He's a Black white supremacist. He is all of those things. But I'm saying he was anti-Black first. And he continues to be anti-Black and continues to make disgusting comments about Black women. And let's see if there's anything near the outrage that people have when he makes comments about other groups. So, you know, I'm obviously saying that facetiously because we know that this man has been targeting Black women for years, and there's never been particularly an appetite to like hold him up for that. And in fact, his career continued to thrive while he was discussing to Black women. So here he is now trying to rip down Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, of course, was an activist long before the bus boycotts. In particular, she's an activist about the gang rapes of Black women by white men and fought for justice for Black women at a time, like we're talking in the late 50s and 60s. To do so was at the risk of her life, obviously, to take on white men and talk about sexual violence and like defend Black women who were being gang raped. She was a secretary for the NAACP. And of course, she was not just tired that day. It was a strategic move. That is not a plant for white people. Our people actually are intelligent and we're like, we're going to fight these battles in ways that we can win. We know that these bus boycotts are unconstitutional and won't stand up, and they targeted that. And she was part of a strategic action to sit on those buses and like challenge that law. And now here we have Kanye trying to diminish that, probably with Candace Owens and whatever foolish white supremacist in his ear, because this idiot man refuses to pick up a book or do anything. So, but we won't see it. As we know, his anti-Blackness has always been accepted, and we won't see anything near the outrage that we see for anything else. So that's it. Ye's gross.
I am on record having said it many times. I'm not part of the cancel culture, but I canceled Kanye West years ago when he said himself something about leaving a Black woman for a white girl. And like I always say, out of all white girls, he picked that white girl. For me, it was very telling. No, Kanye West will do and say anything for attention. The problem is that there comes a point when you start to wonder, is it just for attention? I have long ago reached a point where that's him. That's him. He's, Dave Chappelle, Black white supremacist. To me, that's what Kanye West is. I mean, Black people talking about how he's a genius and this and that. No. I refuse to. You heard me. Why I don't support Argentina in football? No Black player. Why would I go support Kanye West with the nature of his comments towards Black people? I mean, what he says about Jews and Hitler, totally anti-Semitic. But I'm a Black person. I have sisters. There are Black women that I care, and even if there wasn't a single Black woman around me, wouldn't matter. The man is very problematic. I reject him profoundly. So it doesn't surprise me, and he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop until he has, because clearly the boycott that he's getting from the Jewish community and also from Hollywood, etc., it didn't stop him from going to Alex Jones and profess his love. I mean, when you go to Alex Jones and you say something that even has Alex Jones being like, "Oh," like, you see what I mean? That, like, when you see that footage, like Alex Jones kind of like, I'm not agreeing with this guy here. Like, this guy's I've been condemned to pay $1 billion to people from Sandy Hook. I'm not trying to add $1 more because of this guy. You see what I mean? So no, totally.
And
Totally
also, Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman did not wear masks when they went out to defend our people. And this coward wore a mask while he sat there on Alex Jones talking about he loves Hitler. Our people aren't wearing masks when they're in the streets fighting for our lives. So
no, anything for attention. He's look. Some people may disagree with what I'm going to say here. Donald Trump is a monster created by white privilege, and unfortunately, Kanye West to me is also a monster created by blacks being overvalued in entertainment. That's what it is. To me, they're able. These two men are able to say the things they say and to act as they do act because they've been able to thrive in a society that basically create and multiply these pathologies and toxic behaviors. It celebrates them. It celebrates them to a point where basically we end up having these two men. I mean, Kanye West speaking, we know that's Candace Owen and other white racists speaking through him, but he's just the famous one with the louder megaphone. Donald Trump, since the Central Park Five, uh, like he's been there since, and he still became president. Just as Kanye, years of bashing black women, no outrage. Suddenly he speaks about Jewish people. Oh my God! Oh my God! The hypocrisy is general. Yeah.
Well, that will be it for today. I'm glad, Elle, you could stay for as long as you could. I know you have got to make a move, but as always, want to thank both of you for taking your valuable time to spend with our family. As always, Elle, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on the Twitter now.
Yes.
L Jones Poet on Twitter. You can add me. So yeah, do that.
And Cesar? Oh, go ahead. Oh yeah, and buy her book. And Cesar?
Well, basically, I am there on Facebook where you can find me, Cesar Remy, Rimy, and rootsandculturecanada.com. Just two very quick announcements. I just realized that we are December 11th. It's a bit too close, but if you go to Indigo, whether you speak English, whether you speak French, you can find the book Trailblazers, Book of African Canadian History. In English, Trailblazers. In French, Les Visionnaires. I notably translated the book in French, but it's a great work, a great collaborative work by two great black people. And at the same time, get that for your kids. And kids, youth, teenagers, but also adults. I will promote it more, of course. And as of Friday, I can officially say that on top of being an EDI consultant, expert, regional director, blah, 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 I am now, as of Friday as well, a human rights consultant. So pushing these topics, notably on a larger scale, to stand up for our people and to stand up for people who are marginalized. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And want to say best to you. I don't know if we'll have you back on before the end of the year, but if not, have a great holiday season and we will be in touch. So thank you to both of you and we'll chat soon. If not this year, definitely next year. All right, it's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Also co-host and co-producer of the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And I'd like to say thank you to everyone who watched today. So a few last closing comments. And thank you for everyone who watched us live or on the replay. A special shout out to Nova Nicole. So good to see you and your wonderful girls. So a few last things. If you want to get in touch with me, best way, a few ways. Website, thedrvibeshow.com. Email address, dr@thedrvibeshow.com. Also, YouTube and Facebook, the dr. VIBESHOW, Twitter at DRVIBESHOW, and Instagram at the DRVIBESHOW. Want to encourage you to subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook. If you subscribe on YouTube, not only subscribe, but hit the notification button. So when new epic conversations are coming up, you get notified when they're going to be happening. And I'm 24 subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you are up to it and it's in your heart, would love you to subscribe. Also, if you'd like to promote your business or service on our show, please contact me at the email address dr.vibe@the.drvibeshow.com. And finally, if you're up to it, vote for the Dr. Vibe Show in the best Black Canadian podcaster category at this year's buyblacks.com People's Choice Award. All you need to do is go to buyblacks.com/PCA/vote to vote. You can vote every 24 hours from now till the end of the year, December 31st, 2022. Every 24 hours. And if you go back to the beginning, I did show a little bit of a 5-minute video showing you how you can vote for me, for us. All right. So that is it. And it's scrolling along the bottom. You can watch replays of Black Canada Talking at the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn, and also the Dr. Vibe Show website, the drvibeshow.com. So as always, we close out with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourselves grace. And don't just manage your time, manage your energy. So next week, if we don't have someone live, over the next few Sundays, we'll be doing repeats of previous epic conversations on the Dr. Vibe Show. But again, subscribe, especially to the YouTube channel, and you'll keep up to date on what's going on over the next few weeks. And if I don't see you, have a great, blessed, and highly favored holiday season. Thank you for all your support. It's appreciated, not taken for granted. Remember to give yourself grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. God bless. Peace, well, keep the faith, and walk good.